at the table right now, and we'll start. Every speaker will introduce themselves and spell your name. So we'll start with Hank.
Got it.
Hello, my name is Hank Rowlinson, HANK-ROWLINSON, and I'm the chair of the Métis Nation of Ontario.
My name is Mitch Case, MITCHCASE, Region 4 Councillor, Métis Nation of Ontario.
Angie Creer, ANGIECRERAR. Do we have to spell our full name?
And she's an elder, a survivor, a local president, all those things. Audrey Patra, AUDREY-POITRAS, President, Métis Nation of Alberta.
And I'm Cassidy Caron, CASSIDY-CARON, President of the Métis National Council.
Margaret Aubuchon, Isle Across School survivor. Margaret MARGARET-AUBICHON.
Michelle Leclerc, MICHELLE-LECLAIR. I'm the Vice President of the Métis Nation Saskatchewan.
Robert Merasti, ROBERT, MERASTY, Isle Across School Residential School survivor.
Lisa Dawn Smith. Lisa is spelled Lissa. Smith is SMITH. I'm the President of Métis Nation British Columbia.
Is this going to be on TV?
My name is Dean Gladue. First name is Dean. Last name is Gladue, GLADUE. my mother was a residential school survivor. I'm an intergenerational survivor. I'm also a road allowance Métis as I grew up, and I'm also part of the Métis Nation BC Board of Directors, Region 3 Director as well. So, thank you.
Great. So thank you everyone for being here today. As you can see, I'm joined by representatives from the Métis National Council, as well as Métis residential school survivors. We're here today to provide some reflections on the first event of the Papal visit here in Canada that took place this morning. I'll provide some comments, but I would like everyone here to say a few words and really focus on our survivors, because that's been number one on our minds and in our hearts throughout this entire journey, from when we prepared to leave to Rome at last spring to preparing for the Papal visit today, and really moving throughout this week and into the future as well. We will be doing everything that we can to support our survivors in whatever they need as they want to move forward on their healing journeys. So, you know, I said this when we were in Rome, and I will say it again, is that reconciliation, it didn't begin and it didn't end today. Though we did, I feel, make another step forward along this journey for reconciliation with the Pope's apology here on our territories, on our homelands here in this country. It does fulfill one of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, to have the Pope come and apologize on Canadian soil. And, you know, it's very clear from the words that the Pope spoke today, and he spoke a lot of words. It will take days and weeks and months to really digest the extent of what he said today in his apology. But for me, it's clear that Pope Francis listened when we traveled to Rome. We traveled with Métis residential school survivors and had them lead our way to tell their stories, to share their experience as Métis residential school survivors, and really outline the pathway forward for truth, justice, reconciliation, and healing. When we prepared for that journey, we asked survivors, we asked elders and community members, what gifts should we bring to Pope Francis? And the number one response that was overwhelming was that we should bring him the gift of our stories. And we did just that. And on the last day when we were in Rome, we left Pope Francis with a book. And in that book, it had a number of stories from residential school survivors. And it also had a pathway forward for truth, justice, healing, and reconciliation. Because we know that actions speak louder than words, and that there needs to be commitment to action as we move forward down this pathway. So we outlined a number of these actions, and we asked Pope Francis to really reflect on that pathway before he comes to Canada. And in the words that he spoke today, I couldn't help but feel that he did, that he listened and he heard, and that he felt the power of the stories of our survivors, and not just the survivors that were able to travel to Rome with us, but the survivors who contributed their story and their strength and their courage to this journey that all of us are on right now. We know that today is just the first day of a week of this papal visit, this papal journey, one that he is calling his penitential pilgrimage. And I look forward to hearing the words that he'll speak at the following events, including tomorrow at Lac Sainte Anne. I look forward to hearing how he hopes to continue to contribute to reconciliation. Today, he committed to implementing a full investigation, and we hope to find out a little bit more about what that actually means as well. We know that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission took place here in Canada, and our survivors, they shared their stories. And so we know what happened. We know some of those truths. And so I'm hoping that that investigation piece means that there will be investigations into the harms and the abuses that were actually done, and that we can start moving towards that justice piece as well. So there's a lot that was shared today. Like I say, there's going to be a lot of time to reflect on these words, and again, more words that will be spoken at the events coming up this week. But I would like to turn it over to our representatives from the Métis National Council and our survivors, and I'll start with President Poitras.
Thank you very much, Cassidy. I too believe that we heard a lot. I did have the honor of attending with our survivors to Rome and listened to the first apology. And of course, everyone waited for today, for him to come to Canada. And I think we did see a continuation of that. And for me, we've had quite a few different sessions with survivors in Alberta. And they look at, from many, many different perspectives of what they want to see. They talk about healing. We need to look at the healing. They talk about records, making sure that we can get records of our families. They talk about monuments, that we need to be able to leave a legacy of what happened and move on so that our kids, our grandkids, our next generations will not have to deal with what our survivors are still dealing with today. So I believe this is a really good start, and there's lots more to do, but I'm very encouraged that, as our President Cassidy has said, the Pope did hear us, and now we're moving forward in the next step. I'll turn it over to Angie to say a few words. Angie, did you want to say a few words?
Thank you. I also went to Rome as a 10-year survivor in 1947 in Northwest Territories. When I told a story to our Pope, and I was speaking, I took a look at him and I seen his face. I almost stopped because his face was so full of pain, and I could feel my heart. And I knew. I finished my speech. I also asked him a favor, and he said yes. He just said yes, just like that. And, I will never, and I knew that he was speaking the truth. His heart, I could read, I could see his eyes. I'll never, ever, ever forget. And has made me such a big change in my life again. As a survivor, we had a really hard life. But today, and after I met him, I feel so free, and I feel like I'm safe, and my whole family. But for the survivors, for every child that was with me, because when we were kids, we were always going to say that someday we will tell the Pope and he'll take care of us. And when I seen our Pope and he's speaking with his heart and his whole emotion and his face, you could tell. And I was praying for all those girls and boys that I went to school for 10 years. There were thousands of them. And I prayed to them and I said, we thank you. We were right when we were young, and now you be in peace, because he did hear us and he'll always be there for us. And thank you. Mitch?
Musical microphones. So the Métis Nation of Ontario put together a delegation to come here to Edmonton of survivors, intergenerational survivors, and witnesses for those who couldn't make the trip, for those who couldn't make the long journey for health or other reasons. And so we have we've got folks from our communities here who are taking everything in so that they can go back and bring what they saw, what they heard, what they felt, and bring that home to others. And the thing that, you know, when I go home and tell the story of what I saw today is really about the strength and the resilience of the survivors. And I sat at the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican when the Holy Father gave the apology a few months ago. And I sat there today as he gave what I felt was a much more fulsome apology. And all of the credit for that goes to these wonderful people who for decades now have refused to allow the truth to be ignored, the truth to be swept under the rug. And I think that's the message that I'm coming away with, is the strength and the determination and the resilience of our survivors, of our people, of our communities, and the way that I believe their words moved the Holy Father and influenced his words today. And I think when you look at what he did say today, that will mean different things to different people, and I fully believe, and when our Provisional Council met a week ago, we agreed unanimously that we take no position. It is not our place as a government to decide what this means to our people. It's up to every individual citizen, every individual survivor, every individual, son, daughter, grandchild of a survivor to decide what today means for them. And but I do truly believe that that whatever good comes from today, it comes from the hearts of the survivors, who I believe, their hearts moved his heart, I believe, and moved those things forward. And so I think today really is a moving day for that reason, and for when I think about the children and the grandchildren that will come forward, they'll grow up knowing about how strong their families and communities are. So probably have more to say later, but I'll leave it there.
Good evening. Unfortunately, I wasn't in Rome, but I did see the Pope's apology from Rome. Myself personally, I was moved today, not just for myself, from my grandma, my aunties and uncles, my father-in-law that attended residential school. I wish they were here today to listen to the Pope's apology. And like everybody was saying, today is going to mean things for different people. To me, I felt it was a genuine, sincere apology. I felt it. Talked to some of the survivors after. Some of them felt that this is the beginning of a journey, healing journey for them. But each individual survivor is going, like Mitch was saying, is going to take this apology for their personal journey. Either they accept it and move forward, but that's totally up to them. It was an honor, real honor to be there today. The energy in the I'm not going to say room, but outside, but it was a little bit of rain, a little bit of sun, and just the energy from everybody that was there. There was tears of sorrow, tears of happiness, but like everybody says, cautious. There's been some promises, and hopefully those promises will be fulfilled. So thank you.
Hi. So we heard, and I think Mitch and others are right. I mean, each survivor will process the Pope's apology in different ways. For some, and I've talked to a lot of survivors, we brought about 180 survivors from the Isle Across boarding school in Saskatchewan. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So you hear a lot of different sort of takes on the Pope's apology. But I think consistently what we hear, or what I've heard today, is that it's a first step. The Pope talked about justice, healing, and reconciliation, and I think all of his message was genuine. I think that, he did talk about next steps, not, and as our national president has said, we'll see how that sort of plays out in the next little while. But I want to talk about truth. And the truth is that we have a number of unacknowledged residential schools that Métis kids went to. And that truth hasn't been heard. And you can't have healing without acknowledgement. And you can't have healing without hearing those people's stories. The Isle Across boarding school is one of the oldest boarding schools in Canada. Almost 7 generations of harm and trauma. And it was run by the Catholic Church. And at times, funded by the federal government, at times funded by the provincial government. And so they weren't part of the truth and reconciliation process. And so their truth hasn't been heard, so it's hard to heal. And it's hard to reconcile. And so reconciliation, bringing justice, healing, and reconciliation for the survivors of Isle Across is difficult. So we'll take this opportunity to call the Catholic Church, the provincial government of Saskatchewan, and the federal government to task. We need to hold their feet to the fire. And I know I was talking with the Inuit Tapirset president today, and he talked about how they only were included in the TRC in 2016. We're at 2022. As I said, 7 generations of students. Imagine the trauma and the harm and the intergenerational effects of 7 generations of 10 communities. In sorry, I might be going on too long, but this is important. There's a residential school that was just down the road, an hour away in Beauval, and it was recognized through the TRC process. They shared the same nuns. They shared the same staff. They shared the same priests. One would go on holidays, they'd go to Isle Lacrosse. Isle Lacrosse priest would go to Beauval. And so the students in Isle Lacrosse suffered the exact same harms as any Indian residential school in this country. And the Métis story, not just in Isle Lacrosse, but in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Manitoba, and parts of BC and Ontario. That Métis story has not been heard. And as a result, it's difficult, I think, for some of our survivors to be able to really dig deep into the apology by the Pope. Because Métis kids didn't always go, they went to Indian residential schools, but they went to orphanages when they had parents. They went to convents. They went to industrial schools. They went to all of these different schools, or that's where they were schooled. One of our survivors, he's passed on now, his parents died. What did they do? They didn't put him with family. They put him into a residential school. That's where he was raised. And his story is not heard. All these people's story aren't heard. So, as I said, I don't want to be, negative, because I do believe that the apology is a first step to healing. But we need to acknowledge all of these Métis people that have been ignored over the last how many generations of people. So with that, those are my words for now, and I'm going to turn it over to Margaret, who is a residential school survivor from Isle Lacrosse.
What do I say?
What do you think about the Pope's apology?
Yeah. Good evening. In history time, I never ever thought I would see and witness this day that has happened, to see the Pope apologizing to the people, to the survivors. And in my time, I never dreamt of that will come. But as going, I went through hardship. As I was 7 years old when my father brought me to Isle Lacrosse School, drove me by boat. That was the only way in and out, or by a dog team. And I never had even know how to speak one word of English because I had my tongue, I had my language. And it was so scary to be among these people, strangers, not knowing how to communicate, not knowing what to say and what will happen. You're always fear. You're always like somebody's gonna come and give you a licking. And I had long braids. They were chopped off. That was my pride. But today, I'm strong. I stand the ground. As I raise my kids, I have 3 children, and going back to people apologizing, do the right people apologize to the right people? Are our voices heard? I don't know. I don't know about the province, the government. The feds are in with us. Thanks to Michelle, done a lot of good work and started something. And the pride of my life is my children and grandchildren. I do not want to see them go through hell as I went through hell. And I survived and I came back. Because of that, I became strong. I became strong and I stood my grounds and I worked every challenge that I could. I was a politician. So fear, I lived in fear when I was a child, but now I do not want to live in fear. And I wanted my children and grandchildren to go forward. How many of you standing here want your children to go through hell as what we went through? None. None. And this reconciliation has to be to every survivor, not only the federal children, it has to be with the province children too. Every child that have seen the struggle, the fear, there's people that are, old people that are alive, barely. Some of them are committing suicide because they can't handle, they're ashamed of themselves. So we do not want our generation to generation go into that situation. We have to grow a seed, and that seed is love. Without love, any of us cannot be standing here and will not succeed. You got to learn what love is all about. So, my grandparents were the most inspiration of my life. They taught me how to survive. Without them, I probably would have lost my language, my survival, and that's how I gained my strength, because of my grandparents. And people are dying left and right. My relatives, my friends, we're losing them. And the rest of the federal, they've been compensated. We're not. We are no different from these people. You and I, we're no strangers. We're the same. So please help us and continue the work so every child, every survivor would be treated the same as one. And with that, I have a lot of stories, but I don't have time to tell you, but late in the generation, maybe you'll hear it. But thank you, and the Pope, that was something. I never, like I said, never in my lifetime would I witness something. But the fact is, the Pope is old. Why does he have to make an apology for the people that made the crime, that abuse, everything that we went through? The Pope didn't do that. I pity the Pope. And for each and every one of us, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I too was in a residential school in Isle La Crosse. I call it a residential school because that's the way it was referred to. I don't know where boarding school came from. Now, I was just a little boy, 5 years old, when I went in there. I overheard my parents talking about putting us in there Luckily, they spoke the language that I understand, which is what I speak today. Cree and Michif are my first languages. English is third. I heard them say, we have to put our children in that school or they're going to be taken away. Within a matter of days, my mom took me by the hand and led me to the school. At the door, we were met by a black robe, and I will never forget that. When he took my hand, I lost everything. Everything I cherished. And grew up in a strange world. A world full of other kids like me. We were never really taught anything. Like you just heard, we didn't know how to love. We took that to our parents, to our kids. Our kids suffered because of that. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how life was. We never knew anything. The only thing we knew was how to go to church and to pray. That didn't help us at all when we were released from the institution that was a boarding school or a residential school. When I grew older, I admired my siblings, the older siblings, the younger ones that were not there, and my friends that knew how to live off the land, that knew how to set traps, fish, live off the bush, which I didn't know. To my friends, I was a tourist, like you, that didn't know how to do anything out there. To this very day, I have difficulty to make a living off the land. I depend on other employments, other ways to make a living. But that residential school in Isla Lacrosse made me a different person. What kind of a person would I have been? When I lost my mom, I lost everything that I would have had. What would I have had? I would have had my culture. Luckily, I still have my language. But I don't have anything else. When I walk the streets of Isla Lacrosse, I look at the people and say how lucky these people are. They have everything they have in their lives, and I don't. I was cheated out of my childhood. I was cheated out of many things. The first 5 years of school in Isla Lacrosse, I don't know what I did. What did I do? I didn't know how to read English. You were talking. The teachers were talking there. And I never understood a thing. I just sat there like a bump on a log. And here was a residential school. When that burnt down, another one was built, and we still were not able to go home. An elementary school was built over here. We walked from this school to the elementary school, where the teachers were foreign to us, and we were foreign to them. The physical abuse in that elementary school was far greater than the physical abuse that was at the church, at the residential school. These teachers over here were brutal, to say the least. You get 2 pieces of chalk. If you did something like chew a little bit of gum, and the poor girls that did like to chew gum had to kneel on a chalk on one knee, a chalk on one knee, and 2 textbooks one on each hand, as they knelt on that chalk. If your hands went like this, you got a hit in the head with a yardstick. They had to bring their hands up. This is what they had to endure the time that they were there. And so was I. I seen it. Luckily, it never happened to me, but I had been told to go to the principal's office numerous times for no reason at all. When the principal saw you come in, he had a big leather strap over here, and all he did was go like this, and you held your hand here. And you had to cry before he stopped. So lots of us pretended to cry because we didn't know how to cry. We lost everything, our loneliness. We lost that. When we come out of there, it was nothing to leave my family, my kids. It didn't mean anything for me to go and work for 2 years at a time and not come home, because I left everything in that residential school, my feelings, my love, which I didn't have anyway. So the Pope's apology today gave me lots of mixed emotions. It brought back a lot of memories. I wanted to hear about Isla Cross, where I was at. But we're not recognized. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'd just like to acknowledge that we're all here speaking regarding the countless Métis victims of residential schools and their families across British Columbia, not only British Columbia, but all of Canada. As the Pope accurately stated today, sometimes remembering brings back harm and trauma, but it is necessary. It is important that we remember. We can never forget, and so that healing can begin. Begging for forgiveness is not enough. It's only the first step, as many of my colleagues have already stated. Today is really a monumental day in which the Pope apologized for the heinous. Heinous is a word, and there are no words to describe what happened to our children in residential school across Canada. The heinous acts committed against all Indigenous people, Indigenous children in Canada. It's my hope today that our people can begin to heal in their own way. As our national president stated, Pope Francis has called his journey to Canada a penitential pilgrimage. I believe his pilgrimage did not start here, but when the Indigenous delegation left him moccasins earlier this year in France. He returned those moccasins today, as he was asked to do. They were not only a token, but a reminder for the many stories of harm and trauma shared with the Pope on that journey. As we know, remembering brings back harm and trauma, and we just hope that healing can begin for so many of our survivors and intergenerational survivors. Given the historic nature of today, I believe we can work together towards true reconciliation. Today, we see Indigenous identity celebrated, children growing up proud of who they are and where they came from. We must continue to foster this, working towards true reconciliation. I believe we can one day remember without opening old wounds. One day we can remember without harm and trauma. As a proud nation, we will continue to build our self-government for the betterment of our children and their children. And I'm speaking on behalf of my family as well. I'm a great-grandmother, so we need to continue to build for the betterment of all our children and our future generations.
As Louis Riel once said, "My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they awake, it will be the artists who give them their spirit back." So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dean Gladue. He's a intergenerational survivor of residential school from British Columbia. Thank you.
As today was, a lot of emotions go through our hearts and our soul. And I want to say here, I sit here on behalf of my mother, who is still alive, but is a residential school survivor. I wear this lapel on her behalf. They're our women warrior lapel. I deliberately put that on in the shirt as I wear to bring a recognition that Métis were truly affected by the residents. And also another name that is by the Métis, we're the forgotten people. And also, I was raised as a road allowance child. Within 10 minutes, I almost became a 60 school baby. So with trauma, but I've also had a very successful career. I'm a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer of 26 years. And through that, I've learned a lot that I didn't know. I didn't know about residential school until 1993, when I was taking a course at UNBC, Northern University of British Columbia, on Indigenous Studies. As I said, I was taking a university course, and the professor was talking about residential schools. And I went, wow, what is that? I never even knew what residential schools were. And here I was, fresh into my career as an RCMP officer, taking university courses and thinking, I got to grow and learn about my own culture. Because my mom, who speaks fluent Cree, and my father speaks fluent Cree, my father's also he's a day school survivor. But they never taught us the language. They were not embarrassed, they did it to protect us. But I remember phoning my mother in November of 1993. I remember it like yesterday. And I said, Mom, I said, Tansa, Mom, I have to ask you a few questions. She said, did you go to residential school? I just need a yes or a no. She said, yes. I had to hang up. And I cried for the next 2 hours, knowing the hell that she went through. Because it made me understand her now, why she slept with the lights on all the time. As a kid, I had to sleep in the basement, the darkest room, so I can get to sleep, because Mom had to leave the lights on. And I finally asked her, Mom, why do you keep the lights on when you sleep? He says, because they used to throw me in the potato cellar when I spoke the language. And I don't know how long I was there, but we would cry, us little girls, and we'd hold on to each other. So when I see the dark, it scares me. I thinking that a man in a black robe is going to come and take me away. She says these words. My mom, I'll end with it. I asked my mom, I said, Mom, do you want to go to meet the Pope? I'll come with you. She goes, there's no darn way I would pay 15 cents to even see him. Those were her exact words. So we know we still have pain to still heal with us. We still have a road to heal, the road to how go. Because now her children have been affected by it, her grandchildren, and even her great-grandchildren. I can see the generational pain that is still there in our family. I consider myself a very successful businessman now as well, and in my career, but I still live with that pain every day. I still live with the PTSD as a child, what we witnessed, but my mom more so lives with that PTSD still to this day. She's a warrior, she's my hero, and I've always told people, who is your hero? My mom. Not a hockey player, not a baseball player, but my mother, because she survived and she's a real fighter. I come here as that, and I'm also part of the Métis Nation BC political team, because I always say, if you want to make change, you got to be on the inside. And that's what I'll finish with this, that people have asked me, how could you have been a Mountie, a police officer for 26 years, knowing the harm that they've done to your people as well? Because the RCMP do have blood on their hands. And I said, I'm staying because I have to be on the inside to make change. When your own cookum calls you a traitor, you know that there's pain that we have to heal. She's gone now, but I also said to cookum, we have to be on the inside to make change. So I'm proud of who I am, where I've come from, but also proud of where we're going. And our Métis voice needs to be heard in this country because we do tend to get left behind. Thank you.
So I think we have time only just for maybe 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll go to closing comments.
I'm wondering what you hope that the non-Indigenous people, settlers like me, take away from this visit. What lesson is there for the resident Canada?
Who's he asking? I don't think she heard.
I couldn't hear it.
What do you want non-Indigenous people to learn about residential schools through the work that we're doing right now?
I think it's number one is to be, if you're going to do something and we're really with our hearts and souls, that we want to make respected and be known. And we also are citizens in Canada here. To be, we went through everything from about 10 different names, and every time they thought, oh, about time to change those Indians again, so we'll change their names again. But this thing is done now, it's finished. We are human beings. And we have to teach each other. They have to know who we are, and we gotta know who they are. And how do you do that is working together with respect and honor. What the Pope meant so much. As a survivor, as 11 children, 27 children, 14 great-grandchildren, I stand proud because I learned that what they taught us was wrong. Excuse me. I made up my mind, no, they're not what we are. They taught us everything wrong. And that was not the kind of people we were raised. Our wonderful parents, our grandparents, and are also, I always have a hard time, and I'm 86, I still don't understand about my my Catholic parents, grandparents, and all that, is that they always believed in the church. And when I grew up, I was like that until the convent changes all over. I didn't know. In my lifetime, I went through 4 changes. And the 4th change was when I met the Pope in Rome. Because I lost lots, but I got it back. I have a happy life now because I learned to forgive myself and to forgive other people that damaged. I made choices. I learned to make choices. And with the help of many, many, many elders. And I love elders. I taught so much. But one thing we know that this lady recognized too, that was wrong. Everything they did to us, we're still here. And we're proud, and we're hardworking. Our life as children, were lost, but we came back. And we taught them, and we said, no, everything that you taught us is wrong. I had to learn, we have to go back to our childhood and our home when we were children. to find peace and love and respect, because we learned everything different. When I look back now, and my heart bleeds for that child at 8 years old, her two little sisters, 3 and 5. And that's the day I became a mother, and I haven't got a clue. And my 2 sisters still loved me, and I thank God for that. As listening to the others here, my heart was just bleeding. I could just go back memories. I was 7 years old, and listening to everybody here, like, my heart was just like I could barely breathe here. But you know what? It's over. We have to learn to forgive and to move forward. And I know, I trust. First time many of us don't trust, but I do trust my Pope. And today I claim, yes, somebody heard us, and somebody will help us. And I hope and pray that all of you will help us, because you have a lot of power when you're doing all the media, all those stories that you hear. But listen, the truth, you're hearing the truth. For over 150 years, these people, and now finally, let's find peace and harmony and belong exactly where we should be. And with my presidents, I know, and everybody else here, and all the past, and we hope a better future. We know our children, and we need your help. Make how important our children are, all children. And with that, I thank you so much, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to be honest and to be open with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. So we'll have time for one quick question.
President Caron, I wanted to, ask you about something the gentleman on the end referred to, and that's the fact that some survivors will never accept an apology. I know some people in my own family who are not there yet, they may never be there yet, and they frankly don't care about what happened today. What would you say to those folks, and how do you lead those folks?
I would say that everybody has their own self-determination in deciding on how they want to move forward in their healing journeys. I think that, if somebody wants to today accept the words of the Pope as their apology, then they're right. If someone wants to reject that apology for themselves, then they are also right. Everybody has the right to determine their pathway forward for healing. And I think the diversity that we have across the Métis Nation is absolutely so beautiful. Everybody has different experiences. Everybody has different ways of wanting to move forward and heal in their own way. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. And I think that diversity is reflected in the speakers that we have here at the table today. Some are ready to move forward with the apology that we received today as that first step. And I think it's clear that this is a first step. Some people are definitely wanting to seek out a stronger apology, one that doesn't just defer to some individuals within the Catholic Church as an institution, but rather acknowledge the role of the Catholic Church as an institution that facilitated and perpetuated the harms to children, to communities, and to the Métis Nation. And I think, we will continue to advocate for that. We also need to understand that some people's healing doesn't depend on the Catholic Church. It doesn't depend on provincial or federal governments, and it depends on their own choice of spirituality. And we have to continue seeking out all of the different ways that our people want to heal and advocate just as strongly for those healing modalities as we are for a Pope's apology. I will always say, though, that being in Rome, sitting beside 3 Métis residential school survivors and having their reaction to that apology, that was enough to know that what we're doing today, advocating for these apologies from the Pope, advocating for action from the Pope, is the right thing to do. And we'll continue to do those things. We'll continue to use these platforms to continue these conversations, to advocate for justice for residential school survivors in Saskatchewan, at Isle Lacrosse, and all of the other Métis residential schools that have not been recognized. We'll continue to use these platforms, and I always thank the media for the role, as Angie said, you have a very important role to carry these stories out into not just the Canadian consciousness, but the world. We have an international platform right now to raise awareness of our stories. On the note of our stories, though, we do also have a lot of work to continue advocating for these actions from the Catholic Church, including unfettered access to not just residential school records, but church records. Records that tell the stories of what was happening in the communities, what was happening in Isle Lacrosse. Priests kept journals that the Catholic Church still holds today that tell the story of the families that were coming through the communities and the children that were taken away and the children that didn't come home. We need all of those records to be able to know our truth so that we can share that with you and continue advocating for our pathway forward. I think what I want to end on today is what Angie talked about, and what a lot of our survivors talked about, is love. And residential schools, boarding schools, day schools, and all of these institutions that served the same purpose, the purpose was to take love away from children, which is absolutely never okay. Our children came out of these schools not knowing what love was, but our survivors were so resilient. Angie has told me stories of remembering the love that she had from her parents before she went to residential school, and she drew on that memory to bring love back into her life. And now today, as a Métis Nation, as Dean said, we were the forgotten people. We are no longer the forgotten people. We can continue to share our stories. We can be proud to be who we are. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary at Back to Batoche, and it was a beautiful weekend of children running around, knowing who they are, being proud of who they are. Lots of children relearning their language. All of these things that a lot of children never had the opportunity to do. We can do this work today. So today's meeting, today's event with the Pope, the words from the Pope, this is a step forward. There's a lot more work to be done. And we are all in it together as a Métis Nation. We're one nation of many stories. And we're going to continue to fight for our survivors. We're going to continue to fight for our future and for our children, because there was a lot of children who were forgotten. So I want to thank you again, everybody, for the work that you're doing and for continuing along with us throughout this week. So thank you, everyone.
Good. Thank you. Great job. Huh? What?